if you've ever done a jigsaw puzzle before and you find these two pieces, they are roughly, matching shapes and the colors are about the same, and you just sort of jam them together and they sort of stick and they're wedged together and they don't fit right. You have basically felt what it's like to play Elden Ring Nightreign. And I think this is an issue that a lot of people aren't really being honest with themselves and others about. It seems like a lot of Fromsoft fans have a really prolonged honeymoon phase with these games, which is fine. They're good games, but there are some things you need to be aware of. Buyer beware, buyer beware. There are some things you need to be aware of before you buy this game, because it's not perfect. There is fun to be had in this game. It is a fun game, but it has a lot of kind of glaring issues, and you need to be aware of these issues and ask yourself if they're going to ruin the experience or if you can have fun in spite of them. Now, I'm going to start by talking about what I like about in this game, and then move on to the more minor. I say they're minor, they're still serious, but they're not like egregious issues with the game. And then I'll move into the really serious things, in my opinion, that aren't likely to be fixed. And so I'll just get right into it. The game is fun. It's still like a Souls game. It still has those core mechanics that are fun, and it's putting an emphasis on co-op, so it can be very fun, especially when you're playing with friends. But that's a lot of people say that. A lot of reviewers say that. VaatiVidya kind of front ran people having negative responses to this game, saying, "Trust me, guys, it's better when you can play with friends." And that's kind of a nonsense thing to say, because you can have fun with your friends playing a terrible game and like laughing at it. And there is some small element of that here. I think like it sort of feels like that, Anyway, I digress. The game, there is fun to be had, and I think especially if you have two friends who can regularly log on and play with you, then this game is probably a buy and you'll have fun with it. But there are issues, and let's get into those, starting with the combat. The combat feels like a total downgrade from Elden Ring in every way. The weapon swings feel like they're on a very old patch of Elden Ring. Like all the weapons, they swing slow. And they don't feel good. They do not feel like they flow, and it feels totally dissonant with the faster speed of the game. And they just feel gross. And on top of that, the hitboxes are really wonky. I talked to other people. Everyone seemed to have this problem, and it seemed to be worse if you played unlocked. For whatever reason, when you played unlocked, you would have your weapons like business end clip through enemies all the time and do nothing. And that like feels really rough, especially in this game. It's a little bit bigger deal if you get hit and you need to heal than in regular Elden Ring, because you're just moving so fast trying to like gather resources and stuff. So if you run out of flasks, it can really slow you down. And if you like take damage when you shouldn't have on accident because of a hitbox, it feels really gross. And there is a lot of that. Also, I'm one of those people who likes to play unlocked a lot. And I felt like I couldn't. I felt like I had to toggle lock on right before I swung in order to guarantee that my hit would actually connect. A lot of times, otherwise, it just whiffed. And that feels gross, especially like a lot of if you play locked on, you could sort of extend your swings. So if there's a crowd of people, you can unlock and hit more of them. That's not really the case in Nightreign. You'll like whiff and take damage a lot of times where you really shouldn't. And it feels disgusting. I should also add that the balance of the game is pretty bad. It's like launch Elden Ring where bleed weapons, status effect weapons are extremely broken, extremely good, especially when paired with Duchess and her ability, which basically doubles your team's damage output. Anyway, the status effect weapons feel very strong and normal weapons feel horrible. So after you figure out what's going on a couple times, the gameplay loop is always the same. The locations are static. There's not a lot of variation or RNG elements like you would expect from a roguelike, which makes this game very repetitive. We'll get into those. But basically, the loop is you get more charges for your flasks, and then you try to find a good bleed or frost weapon or rot weapon. But if one doesn't materialize, then you just go to the merchant and like buy claws, which are bleed, and that will carry you through the whole game. All you need is claws. All you need is a decent bleed weapon, and that's it. And it gets old. It gets old. It's the same exact thing. And this could theoretically be patched. I mean, Fromsoft did balance their game a little bit better in terms of PvE with Elden Ring, and I'm sure they can do it here, but this is not a mainline game. And I can't help but question if they're going to really balance it well or put much time into patching this game at all. When you see you see so much evidence, you can't ignore it or fool yourself. Like, this is a very low effort game. Like, the Centipede Demon has the same exact boss music from Dark Souls 1. They just copied and pasted the whole thing and put it in there. Maybe like put an updated texture in the folder for the Centipede Demon, and that's it. So the game, like, you look for signs that they're gonna put effort into this game and make it work right, but all you see are evidence of the opposite. So that's how I feel about that. The biggest gameplay issue, though, is the speed. So I think this is a problem they can't do anything about, because you need the speed in order to traverse the map efficiently or as intended to gather enough resources to actually be able to have a chance at the game. But the speed totally breaks combat, because all of these enemies aren't coded or updated to handle the new players' like increased speed at all, which is, yet another very low effort moment. So the combat loop basically devolves into running up, fast sprint. By the way, there's two sprints. There is a normal sprint, which is like the normal sprint, and then a fast sprint, which replaced the crouch input, which I don't know if the speeds are exactly this, but imagine you run as fast as Torrent, but you have full control of your character, including all their special moves, their weapon swings, everything. So that's extremely broken. Think about what you could do with Torrent. You could sprint and jump over everything, and you could do that now while still having control of your weapons and stuff. So anyway, the combat basically devolves into fast sprinting up to an enemy, pressing L2, and then fast sprinting away, and they can't really do anything about it. The one exception being the Draconic Tree Sentinel, just because his projectiles move so fast, you can't like fast sprint away from them or strafe them. But that is it. It completely breaks combat for any other enemy in the game. And I would say that even includes the final boss. There's other issues on top of it, like there are characters that have basically like super light rolls. Like Duchess has like a super double light roll that like makes it so that she can basically never be hit, and you can just spam it without any care. Anyway, I'm sort of going off on a tangent. Fast sprint breaks the game completely, and the problem with it is I don't see how they can change it and make the game's pacing still work. They can't slow it down, and this game is obviously very low effort. I don't think they're going to want to put in the effort to make all the enemies react properly to your character speed, so that's always going to be an issue. Now, I've categorized these as more minor issues because theoretically Fromsoft could fix a lot of this stuff with patches. They probably won't, but theoretically they could. What we're moving on to now are bigger issues that I don't really see any way of fixing because they're core to the game. And we're going to start right with the maps and the variability and the replayability of this game. This is not like the roguelike you would expect. Pretty much everything is static. The enemies are static. The locations are static. The only RNG elements are the loot drops and the bosses you face at the end of each day. And that is it. So that is like not a lot of variance at all. After like a few matches where you learn how this game works, you just do the same thing every time. You go to the same locations every time. You look for the same weapons and you play it the same way every time if you want to win. And it becomes very easy to win if you have a semi-competent team. The game is very easy once you figure out how it works. Again, hurting replayability. But on the flip side, if you have bad teammates, it becomes extremely tedious. So it's like sort of not fun on either end of the spectrum. And it's really like only fun if you're sort of in the middle. If you have teammates who are just okay enough that like there's a little bit of drama to the fights, or if you're playing with friends and you're laughing about all the jank, that's really the sweet spot for having fun with this game. So I would expect Fromsoft is going to have a number of these static maps that it'll cycle between, so there will be some variability, but at the end of the day, there's really nothing procedurally generated. They're not really leaning into what makes roguelikes so fun and the main strength of a roguelike, so that's a major red flag. The most glaring issue, in my opinion, are the multiplayer features. So in past Souls games, there were more single-player games that were augmented with a little bit of co-op here and there. So a lot of the jank or the silly things with how you actually find other players and stuff felt like a feature. They felt like part of the game, or, something that at the very least could be easily ignored. But this is front and center a multiplayer game, and they've pretty much preserved just everything that was from Elden Ring. So the matchmaking is just arena matchmaking with a password. There's no sort of party making system or lobby where you can organize your friends beforehand, which is rough. And then on top of that, when you're actually playing the game, you need to communicate, and this is especially felt very sorely when you're playing with randoms and they don't use their mics and they're not good at the game. You really have no way to ping enemies or items or places from your character. The only way you could ping stuff is if you pull it up on your map, and you can only ping locations as you see them on your map, or items, which I never figured out how to do that, but I guess you can sometimes see items on your map and ping them from there. I never once did it. It was too much effort to do. But there is no easy way to communicate with your teammates just from controlling your character. And that is really, really rough. Especially, this is a co-op game. You need to communicate with them. And so it makes playing with randoms like really unbearable a lot of times. Anyway, guys, those are my thoughts on the game. It's far from a perfect game. It's pretty rough. But if you have friends, it can still be fun.